Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 8 of Before the Commit. With me as usual, I have my friend Dustin Hillgartner. This week we're going to be talking about LLM caching. What the hell is it? What does it do? Can it help? Does it hurt? We're also going to talk about the latest news or noise, interesting discussions going around about Anthropic and the lack of an open source model. As well as a couple other interesting things regarding Stack Overflow and the future of it regarding how generative AI might cannibalize it. And of course, we'll cover in our segment Secure Sus a interesting attack where you could inject a malicious payload in a website and then coerce a LLM to use it as a backdoor at some point in the future. How's it going, Dustin? How you doing?
Good. How have you been?
It's good. Got a little cold going on, but pressing forward. And it's been 2 weeks since our last episode. We were kind of on a nice little run there, and travel and various other things going on. Try not to cough into the mic.
Yeah. Next week is going to be a little bit weird too because I'm moving, so we're going to be recording it maybe a little bit early or doing something a little bit different than we usually do.
Yep. We won't be live next week, but we will have an episode available Monday. Cool. So, we were just talking before the episode started about the CEO of Anthropic kind of taking it on the chin. I'm not read into this, so yeah, let's just kind of catch everybody up on like where we were.
Well, I was actually going to ask you to read. It's kind of like semi-breaking news. I noticed it, so I was going to ask you to look it up, or keep it for a future talk. But yeah, essentially what happened was apparently, I guess Anthropic has been getting pressure about not having an open source model, and recently the CEO was asked about it and had an interesting take on it that the internet wasn't completely in agreement about. That ultimately, I think, boiled down to, if I'm paraphrasing it correctly, that open source models aren't really truly open source because developers on the internet don't contribute back to it, right? So there's some controversy about that response, and some people were saying, well, yeah, it's just a cop out. Also, there was I can't remember who it was, but I think it was like Bill Gurley or something like that, from like Uber fame and other investments. And I think David Sachs was interacting with him on X, and they were getting into it about Anthropic, about regulatory capture, about how Anthropic's business model seems to be centered around regulatory capture. That's what they're saying, or at least insinuating on the internet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of some of the internet battles going on in this industry.
Yeah, it's not really like when you get a model that's on Hugging Face, you don't necessarily, well, maybe that's not the best example. Maybe what they mean is a free model that you can download and run offline. Is that what they mean by an open source model? That you can then essentially retrain or do something with?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've contributed to open source from time to time, but I've mostly been a greedy capitalist in my life, and I haven't gotten completely into the whole open source movement and completely understand it. So I'm not sure if the idea that people are contributing back to the source is like some sort of pinnacle of open source. Like, in my head, I always thought the whole idea of open source was that you're contributing your source back to the market so that it could be used for other purposes. Now, I
Right.
know that it's kind of like frowned upon if you don't contribute back, but I never realized that contributing back was like the point of open source. I always thought the whole point of open source was to keep everything open, right?
It depends. It depends what the licensing model is. It depends what the reasons why. There's a number of reasons why something becomes open source. It's not like a one size fits all.
Yeah, but it just seemed like a little bit like circular logic that he was saying that the reason why they don't have an open source model was because people can't contribute back to it. Where it seemed more logical that the reason why they don't have an open source model is because, you know, they're not running a business that's strapped like everybody else. They can't afford to be giving out things for free right now. They have to monetize everything they got. They have a different business model.
Right.
I think it's probably more accurate. Um, so I think that's probably why people. But I honestly, I don't understand the whole controversy. I'm mostly just looking from the outside and being like, "Wow,
Yeah.
there's some controversy here."
We could probably do some do cover this in a future topic, like the concept of
Yeah,
what is an open source model.
do some
I
apps,
know.
do some due diligence into what's going on here as well.
Yeah. There's some other interesting news. The uh, the the European Union is actually requiring that any code that is substantially generated or assisted by an AI system must be clearly identified in its documentation in metadata. This AI watermarking requirement is designed to improve transparency and traceability. And apparently, projects like those that are hosted on platforms like GitHub and GitLab are scrambling to figure out how to comply. Major open source bodies like the Apache Software Foundation are debating whether even to accept contributions that contain AI generated code due to unclear legal and compliance overhead.
So where does the watermark need to be?
Well, it's not a watermark. It's like that's like the naming, but
Yeah,
essentially you need like how like in your GitHub project or your GitLab project, you have like a
yeah,
license file.
yeah.
So basically something like that that indicates that the code was generated or assisted by an AI system. A
So you
significant
need
There's a significant amount of it.
so you need like a coverage file for
Yeah,
AI.
something that says like that a significant percentage of this code was not generated by humans. And this is a requirement coming out of the European Union. It's a landmark AI act. What
I don't know. Maybe someone can explain it to me. But
do you mean explain it to you in terms of what?
like what it's accomplishing.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, okay,
We can take it a step further. This is the first major regulatory collision between the fast-moving world of AI development and the slow, deliberate world of law. It forces the fundamental question, what is the provenance of code? The line between human written and AI assisted is already incredibly blurry. This could lead to a split in the open source community. Pure human written projects can be used anywhere, and hybrid AI assisted projects carry a compliance burden. It also creates a massive technical challenge. How do you reliably detect and label code that was written by an AI, especially as the models get better at mimicking human styles? And, you know, yeah, could to create a market for AI plagiarism checkers or use tools that humanize AI code to pass the rules? Is this like actually enforceable or is it theater? Can you actually tell the difference between a junior developer's code and an AI's code? I don't really like that because there's some amazing junior developers, but let's just say a novice rather.
yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit cynical about how Europe is reacting to the whole AI thing going on. They seem to like their first response was like they wanted to be like the regulator of the world. And I was like, how's that going to work? That's just going to end up with you having no AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really understand what their take is on the whole thing. And, maybe there's some sort of brilliant reason why this little file in your GitHub repository is going to solve all the problems. But it sounds like just somebody making an arbitrary law for the purposes of appearing like they're doing something when I can't really see the connection to that helping anyone at all. I mean, like, if you were to say like images need to have a watermark if they were generated by AI, I could at least understand where that's coming from, right? But like a file in your GitLab, maybe I'm not understanding it properly, but like another file, next to your license file, like the only person who's going to be in your source code looking for that is another engineer. And if I can't even understand why you would care, right? Like when I look
Well,
through a source code, the
it
question I'm
could be,
asking myself is not
yeah.
like, was this written by AI or not? That's not even in my
Well,
head
it would.
about.
I think the purpose of it is for somebody that is deciding whether or not to import their code, like say it's a library or a package or decision to use it, that is part of your risk assessment from like a cyber perspective. You could say like this was significantly generated by AI, and then that gets factored into your risk profile. Or you decide because of your policies that you do not use this project and you move on to something that wasn't. So I think that's the impetus for this regulation that the EU and to be honest with you, like I also am with you as well. Like I feel like this is as a result of like not knowing how to properly secure LLMs, and so this seems more of like a fear-based reaction. We're just gonna like do a blanket thing that says like no AI or AI. It's like a binary choice at that point.
It's it's like it's using the wrong side of the funnel. Like that's not how problems are solved, right?
Yeah.
Like I get what you're trying to say. It's kind of like um a flaw in like the supply chain. Like you're trying to find a flaw in the supply chain. It's kind of like you're trying to find some like bum steel in the process because some ships were blown up when their armor should have been sufficient, but we found out the steel, one factory's putting out some bad steel, you know what I mean? Because they're mixing in the wrong mixture. So you put in some regulatory rules about like, you got to make sure the mixture meets this quality at this stage in the production process so that we don't get this bad outcome. But this is like just throwing some random rule in for no reason.
Yeah.
There's not
Well, I
even a
think,
problem. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah. It's taking a page from the current way most, like when you look at supply chain risk, like a lot of it has to do with, okay, well, who wrote the code? Who are the contributors? It's a lot of it. I'm not to say that that's the only way to assess the risk when it comes to using, you know, the majority of software written today,
Yeah.
unless you're writing like, unless you're doing systems level engineering or you're writing machine code, the majority of software written today, I would argue, is between 70 and 90% not written by you. It's written by third parties, libraries that you inherit. So when
Yeah.
you look at analyzing the risk of not being able to do like static code analysis, or you're not going to scan the code of all your third party libraries. So you rely on other mechanisms for assessing your risk, right? So you
Yeah.
do things like looking at CVEs, looking at, the reputation of the project. Are there, for example, if you are in the defense world, you look at, are there for our adversaries of ours that might be contributing to this project that may install a backdoor. So it makes sense from that perspective when you don't understand how to actually secure these things. Like how do you, like we're still in the infancy of like generative AI, and also in and even further behind in the masses knowing how to actually secure, generative AI from malicious injection, or not even just code based stuff, but like, everyday sort of back office activities that might be occurring.
It's much easier to fix and identify, as an engineer, engineers know it's much easier to fix a problem that has actually happened, right? Because you can measure it, you can like test that you fixed it and everything like that. When you're trying to be proactive about things, like it's very difficult to thread the needle properly. How do you make sure that the protections that you're laying out for a hypothetical problem that hasn't happened yet is not
Mm-hmm.
just an obstacle that
Mm-hmm.
slows you down but doesn't
Mm-hmm.
actually protect you in any way at all? So it's like that's the problem with these proactive regulations. It's like, well, let's put the toe tag on all the code so that everyone knows the regular, the whether or not you generated AI code or not, because a hypothetical problem of sometime in the future, there's like a trend of like code that was produced by AI has flaws in it. And now we're all like, thank God we have this thing because we can check which ones have it and which ones don't. It's like such a crazy what if thing that it's like, wouldn't you rather the trend start and then solve the problem than to sit there and solve a hypothetical trend that you had a nightmare about? But there's like an infinite number of those things out there that you could try to solve right now. Why that one? You know, I don't know. I'm cynical about those types of things when someone jumps out and solves a problem that hasn't been observed yet. I don't know. Maybe someone out there can tell me there's like this observed problem with AI generate code right now. I think the observed problem that I'm seeing is from engineers saying that their merge requests have gotten big and they're like, I don't like when junior engineers or people who aren't like very very seasoned, they're using AI tools and generating way too much code and producing a lot of work for people, senior engineers who have to review it. You know, I'd be
Yeah.
much more concerned with the code coverage and the quality of the test than I would be about whether the project was generated by AI or not.
Well, on that topic,
Yeah.
there's a new academic study which corroborated a report from Sneak, the company that helps you with supply chain risk,
Hmm.
that delivered a sobering warning for AI assisted development boom. Researchers found that using popular AI coding assistants are twice as likely to introduce critical security vulnerabilities into their code compared to those who don't. This issue stems from the AI models being trained on the vast amounts of public code from sources like GitHub, which often contain subtle bugs and outdated security practices. Then the AI confidently suggests this flawed code to unsuspecting developers who accept
Hmm.
it due to automation bias.
Yeah. You know, another issue is out is not just like secure like insecure code. It could be uh outdated code in terms of like the documentation, which is why
Mm-hmm.
like there's tools like context 7. Like I think there's probably a market out there for like an MCP type tool for like context 7, but
Why don't
specifically for
we
like,
pull on that thread because we haven't really talked about context 7, so maybe just
yeah.
kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think we had mentioned it in the past when we talked about MCP servers, but if not, context 7 is an MCP server. An MCP server, for those not super familiar, it's kind of like an API that LLMs can use as part of its tool bag. um, with new chain of thought LLMs, you can hand them tools and they will use those tools in order to help do or answer whatever question or action you told them to take. Um, so anyway, there's an MCP server called Context 7, which is kind of like this like tool for universal documentation. It's not only like all of the documentation from all the various websites of libraries and various engineering tools out there, but it's like also made very concise and in markdown format so that the LLM can use as few tokens as possible reading it. Um, and you basically hook it up to like Claude Code or some other IDE, or quite frankly anything. MCP is going to end up being a protocol used amongst a bunch of stuff. It's just an API format. So anyway, you hook it up to like Claude Code, and now you can just say, "Hey, Claude, go research the latest documentation for this library or this tool." Like, let's say you're using a new animation library or a new JavaScript framework, and you're not sure if it's using the latest feature because a new feature came out. You can tell it to go look in context 7, and it will go use that to go pull the latest documentation. So it's a great tool. So it seems like there might be a need for like a similar type of tool for like patterns and looking for like AI for security flaws. Um, one where you could say, "Hey, take a look at my login for security flaws and best practices and security problems," and it can just quickly, do a semantic search on this library of flaws it has for logins and compare them to what you're doing.
So you're saying that if you don't use something like Context 7, you could be the AI that you're using could be not getting the proper hints about what, like, for example, like a framework like Next.js might be rapidly evolving still. So like there could be major version changes. And so you might be using like a library, like, or a component that's deprecated, and the documentation is telling you to use it. And that methodology of writing software is, not supported anymore. And so by having Context 7, you're giving the agent the correct
I don't even
clues.
think it's a possibility. I think it's a likelihood, right?
Right.
Because when a new feature or a new methodology comes out, at the moment it comes out, it has no clout on the internet. It's not part of any training materials of any LLM. So the only way that LLM coding agent would find out about it is if it had some sort of tool, like a web search or something like that, to go find out about it. But you'll find when you hand a web search to an LLM, it's actually a pretty ineffective tool, because if you've ever looked, as an engineer, if you've ever looked at the innards of a website, it's got a very poor ratio between content that's useful and content that is just like metadata having to do with some obscure animation or JavaScript files or CSS or whatever, right? So when you send your LLM on a journey to go do a web search, it's blowing up its context because it's basically handed this document, which is the equivalent of like handing it the Encyclopedia Britannica, just to go find out the paragraph in the middle that talks about like the type of Funyuns you like, right? Or whatever.
I started trying to think of you're usually good at this, but like maybe you'll come up with a better one. But it's
Yeah.
like, imagine you decided that you wanted to be a carpenter. So like you went to like Toys R Us, which is now a thing again, and
Mhm.
you went to the toy section and you bought like a tool set, like a hammer, a screwdriver, plastic screws, a saw. Like it's only those things are, you can play with them, and
Mhm.
but you're never going to be able to actually get to the point of doing something like in a mature manner, right? They're toys.
Yeah.
And it's like if you just go and start using something like Cod Code or Cursor without the proper context clues, like whether it be latest documentation or using Light LLM for guardrails, you're just kind of, you wind up with something like this EU regulation that's come out where it's like no AI, we don't understand it. It's writing, you get these studies that show that, like, of course, yeah, because most people don't understand how to secure these things. They know how to use the plastic saw because it won't hurt you,
Well,
it's
in many
plastic.
ways, these things are like they're kind of like a bell curve machine in a weird way, right?
Mhm.
Because it's based on training. Now, the folks that are the data scientists can do some stuff, right? They found that they can say, "Oh, let's not let it look at this training data, and sometimes it comes up with better results. But what's funny is that a lot of the data scientists are finding out that, like, I think this is forged. There's a there's a famous document that just came out of a study, which of course I'm not prepared with, but very recently it's been talked about in the last couple of months, where essentially they're finding out that, like, all the work they do in data science, or a lot of the work they do in data science to slice the training material before you hand it to the LLM, is ineffective or actually damaging, right? They're finding out, just handed everything. Right? Just handed everything. And as long as your cluster is significantly large and you train for significantly long enough, it doesn't matter. It figures it out. Like, it just figures out the noise. It figures out everything. And I think that's some of the lessons that the folks at the XAI have talked about recently. That's why they're building crazy large clusters and everything like that. But anyway, to get back to our topic, you have to know what you're doing, right? It's a bell curve. Like, you're going to get, like, just so, like I was saying, if a new feature or a new security practice comes out, your LLM's not going to do it, because the average of what's on the internet is not doing that. It's doing the previous version, because that's what all the articles are talking about. That's what all the training material is about. So unless you're building it into your workflow that it should go research the latest documentation, you're going to consistently be some amount back, right? Consistently. It's not even like, oh, every once in a while I'll be a version back or two, or I'm going to miss the feature that came out yesterday. It's always going to miss it. So unless you're using something like Context 7 or some other tool that keeps it up to date on some of the latest topics, you're going to miss those things. Now people will say, but my code always works. Yeah, because believe it or not, if you're a couple of minor versions back on a library or some documentation, your stuff still works.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you build something and then wait 2 weeks, it still works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're a couple minor versions back. So anyway, using tools like Context 7 will help you. And I think there's a lack in the security area. There could be a tool that helps you on the security area. And certainly to the right, there should be some sort of code review, like have some practices. Don't be pushing things directly into main and into production with LLMs. Otherwise, you're going to have vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So let's keep pulling on this. Stack Overflow. I actually just logged in and looked at my Stack Overflow account. It's been a long time since I logged in. But I've been a member of Stack Overflow for 16 years and 6 months. So going on 17 years of using Stack Overflow. But, like, there was a time where Stack Overflow was like the spot you would go to find answers about anything. And if you didn't have an answer, you would write a question. And, it kind of gamified it a bit.
Yeah, that was like the center of engineering.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was all these other stacks that were created later on to kind of mimic that.
Well, it
It's
was like
interesting.
the place you went to go ask a question if you were stuck on something, right? Like, you used to be stuck on engineering problems for days or weeks, and you would be looking on Stack Overflow, or actually take the time to write your question into Stack Overflow and hope that maybe days later someone would write back to you.
Yeah. In fact, there was a point in which I was going around on Stack Overflow articles that I had subject matter expertise on, particularly around voice over IP, things like free switch. And, back in the day when we worked at a company, we were building a conference calling system. And I, started learning a lot about, SIP signaling and RTP. And so, yeah, I was helping people out and trying to boost my reputation. I think I have a reputation of like 3,800 now, which is really nothing. But so, yeah, the reason I bring it up is, generative AI kind of makes it like extinct or endangered species, if not already.
Yeah.
Traffic has dropped off since the rise of tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude Code, whatever might have you. And
Mhm.
so, in response, Stack Overflow has partnered with OpenAI to feed its data into ChatGPT, and it actually has its own AI features right now. Although I don't know,
Mhm.
it's a little too late, and I don't know who's actually drop into Stack Overflow to like use their AI chat. It seems a little silly at this point. It's not really an aggregate.
I feel like if I were Stack Overflow, I would be, and I'm sure they probably are, signing content deals. Like, the data they have is super valuable. I wouldn't let people be scraping me. And I'd be looking in my history. I'd have a forensic scientist going back into my history and finding out who did scrape me. And then
Mm-hmm.
I would be sending them bills, right?
Well, oh, that'll work.
Hey, that, $100 billion you just made.
Yeah.
Forgot to mention how much that cost to pull the data. Um, so I think that a lot of those companies that have that data are going to find that actually they have a great asset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know if the website is positioned properly right now for it to survive. I think it would have to change. Um, they could probably partner, or they could come up with a great idea to use their own data. I mean,
It's a
they
bit of
have a
a
unique asset.
it's a
Just
bit of a generational problem. Like, I imagine that, I mean, before even, generative AI became like a thing and coding AI became popularized, like even
Mhm.
tools like Reveal or whatever it is, that tool that lets you just drop into a chat and build a mobile app in like 5 minutes, right? And publish it to an app store. Like, the barriers to entry to the youth of the world. It's like if you're trying to like um, build a better international soccer team to compete in the World Cup.
Mhm.
You start 20, you have to think 20 years, 30 years in advance. So you start pouring money into youth programs. You start kind of teaching people very young, like they would in another country, and indoctrinate it as part. And cricket is now actually a sport that's growing in popularity in the United States. There's a major league cricket team now, and like the U.S.
Yeah.
is for the first time ever competed in an international cricket tournament, and it was actually hosted in the U.S. last year. So it's like, I imagine that the generational problem that Stack Overflow and many of these other forum-based websites is somebody going to think to drop down into a website ever again to find content? Unless they're buying something. And I imagine even buying stuff doesn't even happen in websites anymore. There's TikTok shops and, Instagram shops and influencer. And I imagine the future of shopping is, more integrated experiences in a chatbot or, you know, things like Alexa or HomePod or things like that. So I worry that anybody that's trying to build a website that's content based and content heavy to drive their sales is, or whatever their model is, like they're, obviously Stack Overflow is not monetizing their content that way. But I imagine that that ship is set stale. Like, there's nothing that you can do now.
Um, I don't think so. I
Okay.
don't I don't necessarily think so. Like, I think there's still going to be like the atmosphere and the experience and the entertainment value, and there's a lot of things that like you can personalize. Now, do I think that people are going to be like using the web the same way they normally do? No. I think it's going to change, but do I think that like they're going to be like, "Oh, all websites are just this," it's going to be like Demolition Man where all the restaurants are Taco Bell now.
No, I don't think I
Like, no,
was
no, no,
saying that.
sorry, the
Okay,
internet is just this chatbot now.
no, I don't think that. I think that what I envision the
What are you
future of
talking about? You
the
don't need the whole internet. You just ask it anything.
what I'm suggesting is the future of the internet is probably a more integrated browser experience, and then
Yeah.
renderings that happen more real time. Meaning, like we kind of touched about this the other day, is that like the concept of a dynamically generated website is a database with an API and a rendering engine like HTML. But like if you imagine a more integrated browser experience where the chat and the DOM are connected to each other. Like the concept of a website that is built for everybody becomes less important. And these tailored experiences, I agree with you. Like you want
I think AI
renderings
is
and
going to turn the internet into like a TikTok algorithm, right?
mm,
Where where you can make a website about some sort of topic, and then like people will organically find that content or get there, um but they won't get there accidentally. Maybe they'll get
mm,
there like they're the right person to get there, because the only way they would have gotten there is that their AI concierge brought them there. You
mm.
know? So I think that like um I think the internet survives, but instead of this jungle that you feel like you know, I think the internet has always been kind of like analog TV, where you're just flipping through channels hoping you get to the one you're fine you want to really get to, right? And
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then and then Google was kind of like the TV guide, where now you can sit on the can and read the TV guide, and it'll help you flip through the channels. But AI is going to be like streaming, everything on demand. Like you're going to get to what you want. It's going to be like Netflix algorithm for the internet. Um, that's what I
Speaking
think.
of which, Chrome is actually releasing a new version of the browser very soon, kind of doing what Perplexity and OpenAI are thinking, which is creating browsers. They're now going to have a more integrated experience with Gemini in the browser. And I believe that's coming out any day now. So yeah, I mean the whole idea of the internet, I like that analogy about like, turning an analog dial. The internet is kind of like that. And I see like what you're saying as being very much like true about, you know, and that's probably how the monetization happens. Like we've talked a lot about, what is the future of search? Like when you have those more integrated experience, you can kind of sell impressions into that. Meaning, if you're an organization that wants to get ad space, there's your on ramp to do that.
I think it's counterintuitive. Like, oh, now that you have this chatbot that can tell you everything, now you're never going to go to a website again. It's kind of like
Mm,
when robots come out that can cook and clean your house. Now that you have a robot that does everything, you're just going to sit on your couch and never leave your house. No, I think you're probably going to go places more often, right?
right.
I
Yeah.
think that it's going to be the opposite of what you think, or at least what some people think,
Yeah. It'll
because
free you up.
you're freeing up time, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that I think the internet will still exist. I don't think it's going to be like just a chatbot that answers questions for you all day. I don't think that the whole point of going to a website is just to answer a question the majority of the time. You know what I mean? Um, I mean,
I
right
think
now we're
many
on.
people use it that way. But when you
Yeah,
could start telling it to do things, that's when it becomes interesting. And I think most people either are coding or, generating images. They're not, using it that way. They're asking a question, using it more like a search engine. So, yeah, no, I agree.
But if you think about it in general, I do find that I use the internet to answer questions far less than I did before. Like, obviously, we're using the internet when we use AI, but I'm
Yeah, yeah,
saying I'm using the general internet and Google, and we've talked about this before with Google. Like, Google search, I think, is like
yeah, yeah.
they're in trouble.
It's a difference between searching for something using a search engine versus using a LLM.
Yeah, I use the internet to do things. Use the
Hmm.
internet to communicate with people. I use the internet to read things that other people have made, or entertainment,
Yeah, I think I
or
was saying like websites that are have information like, for example, a forum. And actually, like it takes it a step further. Is like, how do you the problem that this creates is that
Mhm,
an LLM is not community driven. Like after, so like we have, there's sort of an altruistic nature of Stack Overflow and other forums like it, or any forum like a discourse based forum, or whatever have you.
mhm.
Then the idea of like, well, I solved a problem and there's no incentivizing you to go and help somebody else. So then your sort of work that you did to get to solve your problem doesn't get fed back to the rest of the world. And there's always been like this, like, you know, outside of you who's been stealing stuff and not giving back, there's a culture in software engineering of giving back, right? An
Mhm.
inherent like desire to help and teach other people.
Yeah.
And that sort of element is dissipating very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly with the fact that all the data has been scooped up, and then people are interacting with those websites that produce the data in the first place a lot less. Like, for instance, like, I guarantee you that the majority of the content that Stack Overflow produced was in its past. You know what I mean? Like, they're not generating the same throughput of content they were in the past. And it's probably across the board in all these traditional content generation places, with maybe the exception of a few. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that what's going to become more and more, I think that the written content of humanity is just like a little vitamin that jumpstarts the AI, and then eventually it sees, interacts, touches, hears everything. And at that point, it's just off to the races in terms of it's collecting its own data, you know, when it walks down the street, when it talks to people, when it operates the storefront, you know, it's going to
Yeah.
generate its own data.
If I were OpenAI and Stack Overflow, like I would figure out a way that when people are asking questions to kind of feed that back into, like, you need some sort of like sentiment analysis engine about whether or not a response was helpful, and then use that to feed
Oh,
back into Stack Overflow without giving away like IP, and then use that to kind of drive up the efficacy or the reliability of a specific answer for future users. Like I would figure out how to do
that's
that.
what, but that's what the LLMs are already doing, right? Like, that's what ChatGPT. That's why. That's why ChatGPT does have a little bit of an advantage, because they're the ones, right? All that's going to matter in the future is data. Just think of the sources of data. That's all that matters. That's why I've keyed in on the Tesla cars with 8 cameras driving around on the road. Don't underestimate the power a, of millions and millions of cars driving around on the road that have put together the inputs, meaning the steering wheel and the gas pedal and the brakes, along with the 8 cameras, and then are recording that data, right?
Mhm.
That data is invaluable. It's basically telling you what to do when you see this, how to drive the car properly. Likewise, in the market, whoever has the most people come into their website and typing in questions into their chatbot is getting a lot of data, because they're getting questions, and then they have a whole variety of methods of figuring out whether what they supplied to that person was good or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, all that data, those people are getting lots of data. Now, you're saying Stack Overflow could do that. I think the problem is that people aren't going to Stack Overflow and interacting with it anymore. They maybe end up there, or the data's already been pirated and ended up in a chatbot.
Yeah. No, you're right. I get what you're saying. I was thinking of it more like that there's an element to ChatGPT where when you find something useful, not a single response, that there's a way to feed that back into Stack Overflow that then could be retrained. But I guess ChatGPT is doing that on its own.
Yeah, I think they're doing that. I just don't think they're going to share the data with Stack Overflow.
Right. So
They're
let's
like, it's
pivot.
mine now.
Yeah, let's pivot into the tool of the week. So you've done a little bit of research on LLM caching. I know we were talking a little bit about, what Cursor might be doing under the hood. Could this be a technique that they're using when they are subsidizing the $20 a month or whatever it is that they charge now? So yeah, like how are they? Yeah, let's not talk about Cursor right now and muddy the waters. What is LLM caching? What can you do with it?
I mean, to tell you the truth, on the topic of Cursor, I have no idea. I have no idea what they're doing, because it's a proprietary piece of software, so I can only really speculate. But in terms of caching itself, I'm familiar with caching. We're all familiar with caching in the engineering world. It's used quite frequently, but I hadn't
Why
really
don't you
done a deep.
touch briefly on what caching is for those that may not be familiar?
Well, I mean, the most sort of basic way of saying caching, for in layman's terms, is if you're asked let's say you're at a help desk, right? It's just to put it like in a server or an API. It's just a place where you're it's an interface for someone to interact and ask a question and get a response back, or some piece of data or something back from. So you can imagine it's like, a concierge desk at a hotel, or the help desk at a supermarket. Well, if you get asked the same question over and over and over again, and you have to spend time answering that question over and over and over again, you're going to want to like put up a sign that just answers that question, so people can just see the sign and be like, oh, they answered my question. I don't have to go up there on the line and ask it. Well, caching is kind of similar to that. It's kind of like if you're a server that answers a question from a database, and it's expensive in terms of time and effort to go get it in a database, but there's a lot of stuff in the database, so the database is nice to have to go grab things out of it. But you get asked 10 times a day the same question, right? And the answer is the same thing every day. Well, you're probably going to take the answer to that question and put it in a little box next to the window, so that you can pull it out real quickly and hand it to people all day, instead
So
of
you mean
going
the
and
sign at the DMV that says no cell phones is caching?
yeah, it's like you're not going to go in the vault to go get the card that people ask for a million times a day. You're just going to put it right next to your desk. So it's just holding a piece of information a little bit closer to where you're going to hand it off, so that you don't have to walk all the way down the hall to get it. If it's something that you're asked for frequently, or it's something that you think you're going to be asked for frequently. So what that might mean, right, is that when it comes to LLM, let's bring it back to LLM coding agents, right? And how LLMs are caching, right? So the providers like Anthropic and OpenAI and others who are providing the LLM through API to coding agents like Cursor and Kilo Code and Klein Code, etc., who are all using the LLM through the API calls. They are charged, and by pass through, you're charged by using the coding agent. You're charged per token, right? There's input tokens, which are the ones that you're sending to the LLM, and there's output tokens, which is the ones the LLM is sending to you. And there's prices. If you look at models and the pricing, you'll notice there's input and output tokens. But you'll also see with a lot of the providers that there's cached prices. And what that means is that a lot of times when you're sending input, particularly when you're using a coding agent, the stuff you're sending to it, meaning the input, the prompts, often have blocks in them that are the same every single time. Like, for instance, if your coding agent has a set of MCP tools that help you do things like, for instance, web searches, and maybe it interfaces GitHub and does pull requests for you or whatever, right? That little block, that snippet block that describes the tools and how to use it to the LLM so the LLM knows that it can use it, is sent in your prompt every single message that you send to the LLM. So you might say, well, geez, man. And by the way, like if you're using a coding agent, your code is sent all the time. Like that file you have open that you're working on is sent to Anthropic over and over and over again in your context, because it constantly is coding. Well, you'd say, well, that's incredibly wasteful. I'm sending the same thing over to Anthropic over and over and over again. Wouldn't it be nice if I could wrap certain sections of my prompt with tags that would say, hey, I'm probably going to send you this section a lot, so could you keep it for me? And if I send it again, don't charge me the full price for it because you already have it, right? Now you might say that's kind of silly because you already sent it to them, but there's other things they're doing with it that are expensive. They're tokenizing it, right? They're doing a computationally expensive thing with GPUs in order to turn it into these things called tokens. So all of the words that you're sending it in English are created into tokens. So they don't want to have to do that again if what you just sent them is the same, right? So that block of code that's the same the last 5 questions you asked about it, they would prefer they just turn that block of code into tokens once, and then the next 9 times that you asked questions about it, you just referenced it and said, hey, those tokens you made before that I told you to hold on to, use them again, right? And by doing that, the providers will give you a discounted price for those tokens because you're saving them computational time, and you're also saving yourself money. So it works out. So that's what caching is. That's called prompt caching, right? So the idea that when you're using a coding agent and you type in fix the bug, it's not just a tiny little sentence of fix the bug that's being sent to Claude to go fix, right? It's like a bunch of context, like your code is being sent, system prompts, cursor rules, other things is being sent. And you're not being charged the full price for them because a lot of them are cached already at the provider level. So that's what prompt caching is. Now, there are also things like proxies, LLM proxies, like Light LLM that we mentioned, I believe, in a podcast or 2 back.
Yep.
Light LLM is a way that you would have a proxy in the middle, like an appliance that you control, piece of software, that all of your LLM calls, let's say in your office, could go out through, right? And that gives the office IT team, let's say, some control over what gets in and out of the office. So they can make sure that sensitive data doesn't accidentally get sent out to Claude via coding agent, like, .env file or something like that. Or maybe something bad comes in. So those LLM proxies also have caching rules where you could say, hey, if everyone in my office comes in every morning and asks ChatGPT, what's the news today? Like, don't go ask ChatGPT 900 times for my office. Go ask them once and then give the same answer back to everybody in my office when they ask. Right now, you might say, well, they don't type it in perfectly. They might put a period at the end or a question mark, or maybe they misspell a word. Well, what's cool is there's this thing called semantic caching where LLMs understand how to plot when they tokenize things, they're turning it into like semantic tokens, if you will, which essentially assign. It's kind of like the meaning of the word. So that means that, like, if you say, is there something special I can do on my taxes to save money? And is there a loophole I can use that will help me on my taxes? Those two sentences will not have the same Google search results on keywords because they contain the key significant words in them are different, right? But those two sentences will actually have a very similar semantic meaning, right? Because it understands that loophole and special things you can do on your taxes to save money. They mean the same thing, so it assigns semantic meaning to them that is similar in this. It's the way it stores it is like a 3D dimensional space. Anyway,
It's kind of similar to RAG in the fact that you augment um, the vector database with your own specific meanings. Not exactly related, but it's a very similar type of concept where you kind of layer in some additional information into a vector database.
well, that's what you're doing actually in vector databases is you're just tokenizing everything and putting it in there and making it available for semantic searches, right? And you're breaking it into chunks and then assigning a semantic, uh, a searchable semantic attribute to that you can come back later and find something. That's why, like, the chunk size and everything like that can matter so much, because, like, if you slice the content in half with a chunk, the semantic meaning of half might be broken. There's a whole bunch of interesting science around the right chunk size and everything like that when it comes to vector databases. But essentially, in layman's terms, what this means is you don't have to do keyword searches anymore. You can search based on meaning, right? So if you search for, uh, you know, feline and cat, you're both going to find the same search results now, even though those words are different, right? So if the article does not contain the word cat at all, it just contains feline, but you search for cat, you'll still find that article with a high result because it understands the semantic meaning of cat is almost identical to feline. So anyway, Light LLM can cache that way, and other tools can cache that way as well. So that means that when two users search for the weather today, even though they didn't precisely use the same grammar, their two responses can be cached and reused for each other, right? So that's kind of a deep dive into caching as it pertains to LLMs. Yeah, some cool stuff there.
Nice. So before we go, let's just chat about this attack vector in Secure Sus. Um, this person, they have an interesting blog called Embrace the Red. demonstrated that ChatGPT users' conversations can be exfiltrated via indirect prompt injection. So essentially, to execute the attack, a threat actor uploads a malicious prompt to a public website where ChatGPT user may interact with it. The prompt causes ChatGPT to respond with markdown for an image whose URL has the user's conversation secretly embedded. And then ChatGPT renders the image for the user, creating an automatic request to an adversary controlled script and exfiltrating the user's conversation.
So explain this again, piece by piece.
So you basically have a website somewhere or multiple websites.
Okay.
Maybe you know where ChatGPT looks for things. It could be a Reddit comment, which is probably harder to do because of, mods that are monitoring those things. But let's say you have like
so you're attacking the training material. You're hoping to get it into the training material is what you're saying?
Yeah, essentially real time. Or it could be through a search, right? Because training material is kind of like a moving target now because you have like what's trained on, and then a lot of these LLMs can, like, for example, X will like look at latest tweets or whatever.
So you're saying you just got to get it into the context one way or the other.
Somehow you get external context into it, and that causes ChatGPT to respond with markdown for an image, and then the URL is secretly embedded, and then ChatGPT renders the image for the user that has a script in there that exfiltrates the user's conversation.
So how are they getting... It's interesting.
Yeah. So I thought about this. There's a couple ways to, obviously Light LLM would stop a lot of this stuff because you could basically add guardrails. You could do both, as you said last 2 weeks ago on the episode of Light LLM. You mentioned that you could do both input and output sanitization. So you could catch these kinds of things, but also like you could do this with like DNS blocking. So like the goal of this is to kind of create like a way to send data outward. Like data exfiltration attacks are typically prevented through like some kind of egress proxy or DNS filter.
Well, the attack vector here, I think, is that you're rendering an image, right, in a browser, and then that the source of that image is somewhere on the internet, and they basically crafted a prompt that's so specific that the LLM will always pick that bad image out of the internet and show it to you.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I have some questions about how it embedded this stuff in the image and got the LLM to show it that way, but they apparently found a way to do that.
Here's the actual it's a long URL, but I will, so I'll put it on the screen.
Isn't this kind of like a front-end UI problem of ChatGPT, though?
Possibly, yeah, but it could also happen. It could also happen.
They render it.
Yeah, it could also happen in VS Code. It could happen in Copilot. It could happen in a bunch of places. I mean, I think the vulnerability may exist in other places, not necessarily a single one. Like, for example, you could a similar attack could be that you do something and then it renders a snippet of code that does data exfiltration. So like you wind up inserting a backdoor. This guy Embrace the Red, I have it on the screen. He's got a lot of interesting, or they have a lot of interesting, every day seems to be finding a new vulnerability in something, whether it be Klein or Kira, Windsurf. but yeah, we could talk more about this another time after you. Here's another example:
Very cool.
invisible prompt injection. Yeah, yeah. So I've been reading a lot about the OWASP top 10 for LLM. Uh, it seems like OWASP, which is the uh, the sort of open source nonprofit organization that like has for many years reported on like the top internet risks, and they do other things as well. But famously known for the OWASP top 10, they now have one for generative AI, and it's very, very robust. And MITRE also has a framework called Atlas, which also talks about different attack vectors for LLMs. And of course, NIST is working on the risk management framework for AI, which is in its infancy, but there's definitely a bubbling community around different attack vectors regarding generative AI, which is kind of how I stumbled upon this Embrace the Red blog, if you will.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. I'm looking at the one you just sent about the exfiltration of data
Yep.
via the image. I see.
Yeah, I think this might be also another cool topic to talk about in the future. Digging more deeper into some of the vulnerabilities. Um, Maybe rather than secure sus, like we just talk about a vulnerability. Like to me, the threat modeling of these things has really been mapped out really well. Um, and maybe we should start digging into some of the like specific vulnerabilities that exist and how to mitigate against them, because I think the mitigation strategies they're not always well framed out. They're very, very generic. Like one of them was regarding like prompt injection, and it just talks about guardrails. It doesn't say specifically how you, and for good reason. It's not influencing like a specific product, like, but it just says this is generally how you would solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm looking at this article that you sent with the injection, and it seems like over and over and over again, images are like the multimodal aspects of the LLMs have been problems with prompt injection. Like it seems like, and I don't know the backstory of it all, but it seems like on a reoccurring basis, with 3, 6 a year between, researchers will find a way to sneak prompts in via images, you know. And this one you're showing is like, by the way, I didn't even know you could put an image into VS Code. Apparently, if you drag and drop an image into VS Code, it'll be there like a little icon
Mm-hmm.
or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize you could do that into your code, like drag it into a line. It's kind of looks like, to me, it kind of looks like when you hide like one of those little mini JPEGs in an email so that you can get some tracking data out of it.
Yeah,
Um,
one by one, transparent PNG file. Yeah.
yeah, so this is a little image that they put some malicious prompt into, and they put it into like the comment of a VS Code file, and then like the coding agent in VS Code, like when it got to that comment, like read the image as like it was a prompt.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, it's like having a malicious comment, but you can't see it because it's hidden inside of a little
Mm-hmm.
square.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, bad stuff. Uh, that kind of stuff needs to be fixed
Yeah.
over time.
But also, like, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It was very poignant how you said it. Like, I couldn't have said it better, and I'll just paraphrase it because I don't know exactly what you said. But you said that you said that engineers operate on what's already happened, right? Like the mindset of a software engineer is typically not that of an adversary. They're not thinking about what hasn't happened. Like CVEs don't deal with 0 days. Like there's tons of vulnerabilities out there right now that are being exploited that will never be reported for various reasons, right? They serve a utility of usefulness to whoever has access to them. So if you are somebody that is trying to protect an information system, or you have a regulatory responsibility, then you need to be thinking beyond what are known practices that can create malfeasance, or waiting for some organization that you rely on for threat feeds to inform you that you need to patch a system. And this really lends itself to like proactive security measures, not reactive security measures. So you need defense in depth, you need an LLM proxy, you need, as you mentioned, you need tools to the right, you need, dynamic code analysis, AI driven real time penetration testing. So yeah.
I mean, I think that it's like threading a needle, right? I think one of the points I was trying to make was like, if sometimes if it ain't broken, you don't fix it, right? And I felt like that was part of the problem with that. Um, if I remember correctly, it was like legislation where they're putting a toe tag on every
Yeah,
code
the
base to
EU
tell it
thing.
like how much is AI generated code. It was like I could see that being useful if there's a supply chain problem already. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason why there's a little tag on every thing of milk that tells you where it comes from and other things about its distribution line, so that if there's a tainted milk problem, you can find out which cartons of milk in the store came from that factory, etc. um, i I think there's already those types of tags there where you can find out the source of the code, like what factory it came from. But like the idea that like you should point out whether or not the code was generated by AI or not, I don't know. Maybe it'll find itself useful. I just think it's not going to be useful at all. And it's like another regulatory thing that you got to abide by that is, makes it challenging for folks to do business in Europe.
I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about governance versus governance and compliance versus security. And like, there are certainly things that are good that exist in those frameworks, but you have to go beyond the pen and paper compliance and be practical with, that's, I think the zero trust, um, on the NIST guidance on zero trust is, it's unfortunate that it's been overloaded with marketing, and there's a lack of real knowledge around there's certainly literature on it, but there's
Mhm.
really a lack of general understanding of how to actually apply the philosophies of zero trust. But it's really things like that that allow you the latitude be to segment your enterprise in a way, and to kind of construct it architecturally that matches that allows you to be secure, or to have a better risk profile, if you will. And it's unfortunate because most of the cybersecurity industry is not really built around that. It's really built around selling you on this thing will make you secure, or these tools will make you secure, and also the regulation is not really like, and this is an unfortunate reality of what the EU has done, is that they have, and I'm sure there's other things in the AI Act that I haven't been read into. I'll put it back up on the screen. It's a very robust act. I'm sure there are other things in there, but this is probably just a wheel in the cog of an understanding of what you can do in order to protect them. And you know and to the argument of like, the line is going to be blurred very quickly between what a human has written and what what AI has written. Is the
Well,
line is being blurred rapidly.
I think that AI is going to help in security a lot, um, because and this has been the problem with security is a misunderstanding. It's kind of like exercise or going to the gym. Like everyone wants it to be a pill that you take or a thing that you buy that just makes you secure now. But it's not. It's a consistent discipline that you have to apply. And I think that, like, I didn't really necessarily like the perception of like proactive versus reactive. Because I definitely think you should be proactive. But I think the way that you're proactive is by being extremely reactive, meaning you're on top of what's going on a day-to-day. You know what I mean? You're on top of what's coming out, right? Like, I think this idea that you need to be searching around for things that you haven't yet and finding the 0 day before the 0 day happens is like this special myth that happens occasionally, but never really. Real security is finding the exploits on the 0 day and fixing your network right away. That's what real security is. It's extreme persistence and discipline over time.
Yeah, 100%. Seems like a good place to end. I think we could talk about this for much longer, given our sort of immersive. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, looking forward to next episode. We'll be recording it on Monday, and it'll go out. It won't be live, but we'll be getting it out there. Thanks for joining.